So I'm going to just get it rolling and just say maybe you can give us an overview of what's coming in April of 2024 and what your expectations are for how the United Methodist Church is going to get along now that we are showing the global Methodists the door, so to speak. So, and you can use your...
Yeah. All right, so April 2024, we're going to have what's called the General Conference, for those of you who are veteran United Methodists. So it's sort of this large global gathering. It's our highest legislative body, if you may, where representatives from all the conferences in the United Methodist connection, not just the U.S., but worldwide, where we pride ourselves of being a global church. So folks from Africa, folks from the Philippines, folks from Europe are going to come together, and they're going to legislate, propose changes to the Book of Discipline, and propose sort of our how we move forward in the next quadrennium. We measure our times. We're kind of weird that way as United Methodists. We measure our times in terms of 4 years. So quadrennia. So we last met in person in 2016. We missed 2020 because of the pandemic. It was supposed to be the pandemic. So this one is this general conference is being talked about as the postponed 2020 general conference. So it's been kind of 8 years. What's happened since 16? Well, we met in 16, and then we had a special session in 2019. And I wasn't the bishop yet then. I was a delegate to those two general conferences. In 2019, what was passed was a more restrictive stance when it comes to LGBTQ inclusion, right? And so we in the West kind of, dug in and said we're going to be a safe harbor. We will not abide by this We believe that this is against against love. This is against the teachings of Jesus. What was approved then, part of what was approved then, was called the traditional plan. What was approved was an exit plan. It's fondly known as 2553, paragraph 2553, which is a process for a local church to disaffiliate. And there's two requirements that they have to consider in order to go for that provision. It's one, that they need to either be either be against the stance of the denomination, which is right now restrictive, or against the practice of their annual conference, which I would like to believe in the Desert Southwest, where a reconciling conference is more open and inclusive, right? So a church needs to demonstrate that they're at odds. They don't agree with that, and so they create this. They go on this process of disaffiliation that starts with a church vote, and it has to be a 2/3 vote. It's a high bar. I mean, they have to agree. The majority of the congregation needs to agree that they want to separate from the United Methodist Church. Anyway, so that's all background to say that was put in there. Here's the irony. That was put in there by the traditionalists, by the conservatives, as an exit for the liberals, for the more progressive ones. With the postponement of 2020, I mean, their hope, their game plan was 2020. We would already, the 2553 would be in place, and they would just continue to ride this wave of becoming more restrictive, and we would be using 2553 to leave, and they'd become a more exclusive church. That didn't happen. General Conference didn't happen, and so it messed with their timetable. Folks who couldn't wait said, let's go ahead, and they established what's now called the Global Methodist Church. And we've seen a wave of what's called disaffiliations. So traditionalists using their exit door for us and complaining that it's restrictive. That's the irony, right?
Who wrote it? Wait.
Yeah, you guys wrote this in. We didn't even vote for it. Anyway, so there's been a wave, really. Like we're hearing, I'm hearing from colleague bishops in the Southeast, in North Central, South Central jurisdiction. Really, we're talking about hundreds, 200s, 500 churches. I mean, just a lot of churches leaving, and so that's one effect of it. And so some of them are leaving with their pastors. Some of them are leaving without their pastors. Their pastors are deciding to stay. And so in some of the conferences, there's a surplus of pastors and not enough congregations to serve that. What it's also done in other settings that really breaks my heart is when the church or when the pastor kind of pushed a congregation to even take the disaffiliation vote, they found out painfully through the vote, that they were not of one mind, that it wasn't a slam dunk, and it has just caused divisions in churches. And so, and then we are hearing, I heard of a colleague in North Carolina, I think, Western North Carolina conference, where there are churches who have already disaffiliated, more conservative, who are finding out, oh, what do you mean you won't appoint a pastor to us anymore? What do you mean? So they've kind of been misled to, like they're realizing that life outside of the United Methodist denomination isn't what they thought it would be. And so they're trying to kind of come back the door. And of course, there's a process that my colleague Bishop Ken Carter, and I've been curious to see what that looks like in the reaffiliation of these churches. So it's kind of like the
Get a do-over.
The love your enemy.
How many churches in the Desert Southwest Conference have disaffiliated? Are you ready?
Zero. Now, so we were watching 2, maybe 3, and then we were like, we'll help you with this. We'll give you a timeline. We'll give you a process. Your stuff needs to be in by this. And the timeline, the deadline came and went, and there wasn't any. It's not to say that there aren't churches who want to disaffiliate. There are some, but it's either one, they're willing to, one, maybe they're hoping. So this goes to your question. If you probably noticed, I'm a very indirect communicator. I communicate by stories. I'm asked a question, I tell you a story to get to where I am, but I'm getting there. So one of the hopes I'm hearing from the more conservative folks is that the General Conference in April would come up with a more equitable exit, more equitable than 2553. They don't like the deal that they brokered in the first place. So it'll be interesting to see if that is the case, given that they don't have delegates anymore. They've disaffiliated, and there's a question to Judicial Council right now around Judicial Councils like our Supreme Court, if you may, they decide on issues, there's a question around, can a delegate who, now remember, this is the postponed 2020, so they would have been elected in 2018 or 2019. And their churches have already disaffiliated, so can they rightfully attend General Conference as a delegate? And so, of course, I'm seeing, of course not. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but they're asking that question because we're hearing that, and we've seen that in some cases, even in the West, where there are folks who are clearly aligned with the UMC. So there's that hope. Those of us, though, who are seeing the other side, so to speak, are trying to shift the narrative to say, what's on the other side? What's on the other side of this? What is God calling us to do and be post-separation? We ought to be talking about that already. There's a sermon that's waiting to be preached in me. I've gone through different iterations of it, talking about Joshua and the crossing of the River Jordan, right? And we're at that crossover point. And we can't be looking back to Egypt or the wilderness, as some of the folks during Joshua's time were thinking, right? Like, oh, it was better in the wilderness. They have giants in the promise. I mean, what does it look like to actually cross over already? And we can't just be thinking about the LGBTQ inclusion debate. We've got to be full on approaching. We've got to be full on confronting, is the word I was looking for, confronting the issues of our denomination. And I'm talking about white supremacy. I'm talking about our church being a predominantly white congregation, white church, with systems that are built for white people. And I'll say that not as a hateful thing for all of you white people in the room. I say that with love to say that there are still imbalances, even for me as a person of color bishop, have to hurdle because of that. So when we think about what it is that's in that next iteration, beyond 2024 or beyond 2028, we need to be thinking forward. We need to be thinking about what it is that we need to shed in order to not redo the sins of the past, so to speak. So
Awesome. Tell us who you are and then ask your question.
I'm Beth Dyer, longtime member of the Fountains Church Council chair here. So my question is that when you talk about that, that's encouraging to me to hear you say that. And does that include looking at church in general? I mean, in my view, churches are dying, all over, not just, especially the institutionalized churches, the Protestant and, the what I call evangelical or the big box churches seem to be thriving in some ways, while our churches seem to be dying. So is that also an intention to look at that and maybe give your impression of that?
I think so. I mean, never waste a good crisis, right? Is what people say. And I mean, we've had crisis upon crisis. We've had this inclusion debate for 50 plus years now. And then it was just exacerbated. And then the racism debate or issue within our systems for even longer. And it just kind of got exacerbated by COVID. And it was clear, it is clear that the ways of doing church, that those of us, the ways of doing church of the previous generation don't work anymore. Not that they weren't effective then, not that they weren't, what needed to be done then. But I always say every generation of Christians needs to figure out what they need to do and how it is that they are going to be church during their time. one of the things we struggle with as an institution is that we look at what worked and we think that it's going to work for eternity, right? Instead of looking at ourselves as an organism that constantly shifts with the shifts of culture and the tide and etc. I mean, I talk about racism, for example. Like, what does it mean for there to be a Filipino American bishop, right? So let me give you an example. In the Council of Bishops, they pay for bishops to attend there, and this is just a very simple example. They pay for bishops to attend our caucuses, our ethnic caucuses, those of us who are people of color. So African American bishops go to BMCR, Black Methodists for renewal. The Hispanics go to their thing, and their expenses are paid for. So first Filipino American bishop, we have a Filipino American caucus. I inquire before I went, because I'm just that way, like, will my expenses be paid for in attending the Filipino American caucus? And by the way, there's also an Asian American caucus. So will my expenses? And the response was, well, no, because it's not in the policy. It's right? My point exactly. It's not in the policy, and so it's not written out. Filipino American United Methodist. But the spirit of the policy is that we pay for the bishops to attend their caucuses, right? And so that would have been the case for David Wilson, the first Native American bishop, to attend his own caucus, because it's not written down there. So it's things like, I share that not as a pity party for me or to diss on the Council of Bishops, but I share that as there needs to be a constant rewriting and rethinking of the ways we do things in order to be relevant during our time. Going back to that Joshua imagery, if you read that, and I'm preaching the sermon already, so you get a preview. In the crossing of the Red Sea, Joshua had, so Ark of the Covenant goes into the water, the waters recede, they're able to cross over. Then he sends 12 people, one from each tribe, to pick up stones from the bottom of the Jordan and bring it to the promised land as a memorial for them. And then everybody crosses over, the water flows again. What we miss about that passage is, as those 12 representatives were bringing 12 rocks to the other side, Joshua took another set of 12 stones, left it at the bottom of the Jordan where the priests were. Now, stay with me here. Where the priests were standing with the Ark of the Covenant. And so when everybody had crossed over, the waters flowed again. There's a pile of 12 stones in the new land. There's another pile in the bottom of the Jordan. And so I asked the question, what is it in that new way of being? What is it that God is calling us to take with us to the promised land? Because it is important to who we are and how we are going to order our life moving forward. And what is it that helped us get to where we are thus far? That was helpful, that was meaningful for a season. What is it but that we need to name but leave at the bottom of the Jordan, because it's not anymore going to help us moving forward? And how do we bless and encourage, bless that, but leave it there, right?
Preach it.
That'll be my annual conference sermon. So, and it's so important. To your question though, the annual conference is the basic unit of United Methodism, right? And so it is for us together to be able to to do that kind of thing, to really name and say, oh, we're not going to do this and this anymore. And it's going to be case by case from church to church, right? I mean, there will be churches which will still go, all bells and whistles and incense. Does anybody use incense and robes and high church? Because that's what's needed in their context. But what is your context in the fountains? And what is it that, in the 80s or 90s when this church started and they did things, what is it that worked for them then, that worked for them for a season but isn't working anymore? And so it's, to your question, it's not going to be, I think theoretically on a global level it'd be good to be on the same page on that, but I think practically where it's going to happen is in the annual conference and in the local churches.
Great. Another question from someone. And this jacket, by the way, I was at the bottom of the Jordan, but because the bishop was coming, I waded in and got it.
Let's shed the jackets if you want.
So along the same lines, how do you attract the younger generation at this point?
I would start with shifting our focus from attracting them to really offering something that they would want to be part of. It goes beyond the attractional model of, that church is the place of what's going on, so I'm gonna go. What is it that Gandhi said? I love your Jesus. It's your church I don't like, or I'm paraphrasing, obviously. So, I mean, there's no silver bullet really. Pardon the gun language, but there's no if you have a band, or if you have a hotshot youth director, or I think it's the willingness to try and fail tremendously and try again, and and do the autopsy of the failure. I mean, that's where we fall, is when we try something, we fail, we blame each other and we cut people, and then that's the end of that. I mean, what if we give ourselves permission to fail as we try things, and then we do it, not to fail, but really we give our darnest best. But if we fail, then we chalk it up to, that was a good experiment. Why did we fail? Where did we fail? And how can that inform how we move forward? In Microsoft, they have this spot, this place called the Garage. The sauce folks will appreciate this. The Garage is where you tinker, is where you kind of put things together, experiment. And so they have this division in Microsoft called the Garage, where they invite their employees during their program break, to go and just play and experiment. And many of the products that are in use right now, all of you Microsoft users, found their genesis in the Garage. Like, what does it look like to be a garage in the church? And to really just not be afraid to fail and try new things until something works. And what does it look like to ask the young people, the few who are with us or who we are connected with, instead of us kind of prescribing and kind of deciding, they just need a praise band, or they just need this and that, or they just need a kind of hippie, or not hippie, but hipster youth director, and they'll be fine. What does it mean to really ask them, what's Jesus to you? What does it look like to be in covenant community and church. What does that look like? And there's no one size fits all. Whatever, Paradise Valley is doing, we can't just replicate them here. Or whatever, Tucson First is doing, we can't just replicate it in Las Vegas. It's each faith community needs to do the hard work of listening to stories, listening to what their youth need. In some places, it might be mentoring. In some places, it might just be a safe space to be with friends, to hang out with friends. In some places, it might be a gaming room, where internet is high and there won't be lag when they're playing their favorite games. I mean, what does that look like from church to church? Does that? I mean, it really doesn't get at exactly what programs, but it gets at how we approach them.
Dave James, we recently had a Methodist gathering of youth in Florida. I think we had 100 and some from our conference go, and maybe 1,700 gathered in Florida. What's the feedback from that?
So I was there. Still young. No, I was there because our son was there. Our son was there, and it was 1,700 kids who had a passion for Jesus in the church, who were given time and space to be who they were. It was interesting to watch. Raddy and I, my wife and I, walked around, tried to not be the the parents watching their kid, but really and we even stayed in a different hotel. But we walked around during the sessions, and it's interesting what the youth gravitated to in terms of the workshops. I mean, a broad spectrum. I mean, you would think somebody was talking about, there was a workshop about church structures and legislation to General Conference. You would think, oh, that's gonna. It was a full house, which makes you think, youth. That's old saying, youth should be seen but not heard. I mean, youth want to have a voice. Youth want to have a say, and if we are able to create space for that, like. I wouldn't have discerned my call to ministry if not for a church that created space for me to be who I am, to be able to ask my questions and to deal with my idiosyncrasies. So.
Great. Let's do one more question since we're past time.
I had a quick, Dee, okay, maybe we can quick share, like I can talk on the way over.
Sure, yeah.
Yes? Okay. I'll talk on the way over to Dee regarding the youth. I can't get my own son to come to church because he says he's an atheist. I think he's too young to decide that, and probably I shouldn't have just told everybody that, because now he'll be embarrassed. If he does come, he'll come, but anyway, I said this would be short. I thought maybe if youth, if we could, and I know we've already done this, but maybe we could say, okay, what do the youth worry about? They worry about guns in their schools, and they worry about the environment. So those are just two hotbed topics that they are faced with, and they're angry with we older people because they don't see us doing much about it. So maybe we can make noise about that over here at the fountains.
Yeah, and I mean, to give you, like, our younger son Titus, so he was 4 years old when I was appointed superintendent. So really didn't have the experience of being a PK in the church where, he was like, he didn't have enough of that. And I was superintendent for 8 years, and then I was elected. So now he is struggling with, what does it mean to be a bishop's kid? And to be my own thing. Like, we asked him about, confirmation class at one of the churches here, and because some PKs were going to be there, and he wasn't really interested and into it. And like you said, at their own time, in their own pace. And we know this. We were young once, and of course, of course, for us, and certainly for your generation, you will go to church, right? And you will go to Sunday school. But I think there's a way to love our kids and to walk with them that doesn't pressure them so that they end up hating the church and hating God, instead of the opposite that we were hoping for.
So I'm Dee Dee Rudolphi, and my quick question is, because it's surrounded so much the church split over the LGBTQ issues, ordination and marriage. So will those be like number one on the list of things that will be a rewritten resolution that'll get taken care of like early on in general conference so that we can go forward? Or how do you see that playing out?
Can you be more direct, Dee Dee?
Can you make it happen? Yeah. I'm with you there, Dee Dee. I hope that would be the case. The way the General Conference works is it works by legislation. So anybody, an individual, a group, or a committee, you can submit a petition.
I actually did
And you
submit
did? Yeah,
one
yeah.
several
And then-
years ago.
And then this goes to committee, and a committee of what, 100 people plus, and so if you read the book of discipline, it's clearly a mishmash of different people wanting their word in, and this word and that word, and so I hope so. We're gonna get there. I think we're gonna get there. That is my hope, and getting there sometimes means we continue the hard work of living into how we get there, right? Like, here in the Southwest, it's not even. We're doing it. It's kind of like that mic drop moment at the 2019 General Conference when a more restrictive law was passed, and those of us in the West who were delegates then stood up, and our representative said, yeah, not in the West. So I think that is the goal. Whether it happens in 2024 is your best guess and mine. And we bishops don't have a say in it. It's kind of weird. We're gonna sit. I don't know.
You don't get a vote anymore.
I don't get a vote anymore. When I was a delegate, I vote. We stand. We sit at the presider's the stage, and really just provide pastoral care to our delegations when a vote goes a different way or not. But the movement is really towards inclusion. I would think. I take solace, I take encouragement from our Episcopalian and Lutheran siblings. I meet with my counterparts here, judicatory counterparts, and so I ask them the question often. So it's y'all are in our future. Like, what does that look like? What does the other side of the Jordan look like for us? And what are tips? What would you do differently than what you did in your denomination? So that's been an interesting and encouraging kind of exercise. So it'd be great if it would come out from that, but I'm afraid I couldn't guarantee it for you.